Hey, good morning, options traders, and welcome back, everyone. I wanted to post a quick video in response to one of the postings that one of our traders put up earlier in the week. And in that post, he had talked about a certain pattern that he had identified and said that if he buys options that are, let's say, 10% of the stock's price and have X amount of time remaining, and there's an earnings wedged in there somewhere, and that they tend to make money more often than not. And while that certainly could be true, you could go back and look at past data and find that in certain instances, when this happens, this is more likely to follow. And unfortunately, too many times traders say, therefore they have found a secret pattern that is going to give them all the riches in the world because this always seems to follow. And there's a number of problems with that, but what I want to do in this video is to point out two of them, and just to say that you have to be really careful about putting money in the face of risk just because you've identified a particular pattern. So the first thing is to understand that patterns have a higher probability of occurring by looking at past data. That's the first problem. And it's partly because the patterns haven't been determined beforehand. All you're doing is going in there and fishing for stuff. And then when suddenly pops up that seems to have some type of a pattern, it's, oh my gosh, look at this. What a coincidence. Well, if you haven't determined beforehand what those patterns are, then anything counts. And obviously there's a lot more things that could happen. So for instance, let's say that we are sitting down having lunch and I say, you know what? I'll bet you and I have the same birthday. And if that were true, that would be a remarkable coincidence. But that's because I announced that beforehand. But now on the other hand, what if we start talking and we find out that we were born in the same month or on the same day, or we have a sister by the same name, or we both went to the same college, or we have family living in a different state in the same city, or. You see where I'm going with this? There's a million things that we could have in common. And if we just start fishing around and we go, oh my gosh, look at this, what a great coincidence, doesn't really mean anything. Those patterns that you're trying to identify in the market should be predetermined. You should say, here's what we're looking for, and then go see if they happen. But traders don't do that. They just go in and start fishing for patterns and then assume that they are going to repeat. Now there's a second problem, which is the first bullet point right here, is that your patterns have a higher probability of occurring just by looking at the past data. And so to show that, let's say that we have a 50% chance for heads or tails at the flip of a coin. And so statistically, the chance for getting 10 in a row would be two different things that can happen, heads or tails, raised to the 10th power, or 1,024. So what that means is that if we flipped a coin 1,024 times, we would expect to see at least 10 in a row of either heads or tails. And sometimes that throws people by surprise. They just think that 10 in a row seems so unbelievably unlikely. It's not. It might be rare, but given enough occurrences, you are definitely going to see it. So the thing that I wanted to show here is that looking at the past data shows far more occurrences than what you might expect. So let's do that. Let's go into an Excel spreadsheet, have it flip a coin 1,024 times, and I'll show you why you're going to get far more than 1,024. Okay, so now we're into an Excel spreadsheet, and over in the first column, I just have the numbers 1 through, and you can see all the way down here at the bottom, we have 1,024 rows. And so these are just the various coin flips. And the second column here, we're just telling Excel to create a random number between 0 and 1. So let's say that 0 means heads and a 1 means tails. So those are the sequences of coin flips. Now the third column, what we're doing is we are counting. So right here you can see this 2 means that we have 2 in a row, whether 2 heads or 2 tails. Down here is 6, whether tails or heads. And there we can see that we got a series of 6 heads before we had to break that streak. Now over here in this column is just the 10 streak. And this is going to show how many times we have seen 10 in a row. So it's just a different way of looking at the data. Now this number right here shows us the maximum number in this column. So it's going to go through and it's going to find the largest streak that we've seen. Okay, so let's try that a few times. See, there's 11, there's 9, there's 10. Remember, we would expect to see at least 10 one time. There's 14. There's 11, 8. So if we go through here, you'll see that it doesn't take too long before you start seeing really long streaks. Okay, so here's a good one. Got 16. That's actually quite high. And so now let's look and see if we can find, first of all, where that occurred. Here we got 13. Didn't quite hit 16. Let's look through the list. And here we go. There's our 16 in a row. Right there, all of those heads. Now, the first thing to notice is that, again, think of us sitting down at a table and I say, I'll bet you we can flip a coin and I'm going to get 16 heads in a row. That would be unbelievably next to impossible. Your chances would be 1 in over 65,000 for that to occur. But see, that's not what's happening here when we're fishing through past data. Take a look. Once I got 10 heads in a row, which should be expected once in 1,024, if I then said, I'll bet we'll get a head on the next flip, well, that's only a 50-50 shot. See, that shouldn't be all that surprising given the fact that we've already flipped 10. And then once we get 11, and I say, I'll bet we're going to see heads on the next flip, well, that's not so surprising. I would be right half the time. Given the fact that you've flipped 11, getting a head on the next one is a 50-50 shot. And so that's why we're getting all of these overlaps. Now over in this column, remember, this is counting the series of 10. So here, that was our first series of 10, but look what happened. Right away, we got another series of 10. See, that looks like it's just unbelievable. How rare would it be to get 10 in a row? And yet we could look at the past data and go, look at something is going on here because we've got so many consecutive flips of 10 in a row. And it's not. It's just the fact that once we had 10 in a row, looking at the past, getting 11 wasn't a big deal. And then once we got 11 in a row in the past, getting 12 was a 50-50 shot. And the pattern just continues. And that's why you can end up having these long spurts of what appear to be unbelievably low probability sequences. And it's just because you're looking at past data. So just remember that when you're looking at past data, you're going to see what appear to be some unbelievable streaks. Let's see if we can go back up here to the beginning where we got 13. Didn't quite get 16, but here it's got pretty close. And once we did, these were for tails here for our ones, there were 10 in a row right there, and then got 10 in a row again, and then 10 in a row again, and 10 in a row again. And that's just because once we got 10 in a row, it wasn't all that unlikely to see it happen again. And then once we got 11 in a row, it wasn't all that unlikely to see another 10 in a row. And that's just because we're allowing for these overlaps. And so that's why it can look like these are some unbelievably low probability events. You could look back and say, look at how many times we were getting 10 in a row. Something must be going on here. And it's just the fact that you're looking at past data and allowing for these overlaps. So I'm not trying to ruin everybody's fun. By all means, go out and look for patterns. It's part of what traders do. It's part of what humans do. But you have to be very careful about your interpretations. And so the thing that I just wanted to point out right now is that when you're doing this and you're stumbling on things that appear to be just beyond believable, step back and think, is it more because you found the holy grail of trading? Or is it just because you're looking at past prices? And so for anyone who'd like to learn more about the art and science of options trading, please check out the Alpha Trader course, Strategy Lab, and a technical analysis course. It's all at optionsatoz.com. Also, please join us on the Facebook trading group, Options A to Z, and you can find a link in the description below.